record live.
Awesome. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining for another episode of the Website Redesign Committee. Let's go around and quickly do introductions like we always do. I'm Adam. I'm a software engineer at LinkedIn and a member of the community committee and co-chair of the Website Redesign Committee. Tierney, you want to go?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tierney Siren. I'm a developer advocate at NodeSource, and I'm chairperson of the community committee. And I'm also a member of the Website Redesign
Awesome.
Committee
Initiative. Keep going down the line. Gary, introduce yourself, quick.
Hi, I'm Gary Abraham. I'm involved in the mentorship team. I'm also involved in the co-design team. Also currently chairing Node.js Africa. And I'm happy to be here.
Great. Francisco, thank you for putting your first name in the description there. You want to do a quick
it takes me a little while to learn, but I got it this time. My name is Francisco, CEO of RunKit, member of TC39, and just here to help out in any way I can.
Great. Dhruv?
Hi, I'm Dhruv. I'm a student from India and also a member of internationalization team on Node.js Foundation.
Great. And Manil?
Hey, y'all. I'm Manil, member of ComCom, member, co-chair of Website Redesign Initiative, typically joining out of Vancouver, but for now in Seattle, Washington.
Awesome. Cool. So let's get started. We have a pretty full agenda, especially if we spin off into some of the conversations I'm expecting. It looks like website wireframes made it on to the agenda again. I think we just forgot to take the label off. Did we have anything we wanted to talk about?
I can go take that item off while we're waiting.
Okay, awesome. It looks like there was a comment. Yeah, no, I don't think there's any new stuff to discuss here. We had agreed last time that we're moving on to visual design, at least preparing for visual design after this point. And I think we're in the same place for number 12, where we just forgot to remove the ticket. Recap from last time, we got a couple, over the last couple meetings, we got some great demos from RunKit. Thank you, Francisco, and from Glitch. And as we keep going through the design phase, we're going to keep all those features in mind and choose where and how we want to use those technologies. So thank you, Tierney, for taking that label off again. Okay, let's dive into probably the most visual thing to look at, which I expect us to kind of spin off into a process talk again, because we're trying to figure out exactly how we're going to be managing design contributions. It's where the conversation left off last time. So quick recap from last time, at least how I remember it. We were discussing if we wanted community contributions versus getting a dedicated paid person through the foundation. And we kind of agreed we wanted to explore the community contributions path and make it as easy for people to contribute high fidelity mocks and work through this design in the community versus paying an agency to make it happen. And part of that was getting a packet together before we make this open call for designers to at least keep some consistency in the mocks. So I went ahead and made a whole slew of tickets for laying the foundation of a Node.js design system. So we can keep all these foundations kind of consistent. And we don't have to do a bunch of wrangling work from people who want to contribute more detailed mocks of actual pages together. So we have a project underneath the org now, which is called a Call for Designers Roadmap, which I've been keeping these tickets under. Presumably when all the tickets in this project move over to the right-hand column, we'll be ready for that call. And I kind of kicked it off with the first design systems feature proposal, which will probably also be the most contentious, I assume, because it involves some color tweaks. So that is issue number 42, which I'd love to dive in and start discussion on.
So I'm just going through this, and it looks really nice. You've done a really good job. Do you want to go through the kind of outstanding questions? Do you want to go through that like item by item?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
So there's a Medium post attached, with a lot more like design rationale and nitty gritty how this stuff was made. Get into the color theory and the science of it a little bit, and goes into the nitty gritty of like how by unifying the Node.js green color vertical, brand colors changed just a hint to kind of make it all more cohesive and more internally consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows the difference here. Pantone colors remain the same, so we're not updating any physical things or printed things. It's really just digital assets that need to be changed for the most part. But by making these couple small tweaks in that green vertical, not only do we keep the Node.js brand consistent and keep the same ethos for what it had before, but it locks it in with this other extended color palette, which we can use for both website redesign, UI affordances. The badges team wants to use this for creating an illustration spec and a badges spec, and having more colors and more emotions at our disposal. But because of my approach to this proposal, there's a few outstanding questions still. The first of which will actually extend to any foundation. Like, how do we, this working group and the ComCom as a whole, and if needed, the foundation itself, what's the process for approving these things? If we make these kind of foundational, like, this is Node brand design guideline, how do we institutionalize that? Question number 2 is most of these design systems changes probably won't affect brand related material as much as color, since I'm proposing a couple tweaks to those main 3 brand colors. And although they're very, very slight, they're still changes. So I want to make sure we respect that process and the importance of that, if it's even possible. This solution uses an open source color library as like a foundation for the supplemental color verticals. So red, orange, blue, purple, pink. Anything that's kind of an extension of the original Node.js gray and green colors come from this open source Apache 2 licensed design system library, as it kind of lays the foundation for the rationale and the extra color verticals. And then question number 4 is just, what do we think about the extended color palette? Do we like it? Is it something we want to pursue? Is it something we feel like we're going to need long term? And yeah, so that's kind of the conversation I'd like to have around color palette specifically. And as we start pursuing these design systems tickets as a whole, how do we want to structure the conversation?
Awesome. So I think the first 2 I can talk to, and I think I'm also going to call on Mark a bit because Mark joined to talk a bit about this as well. Oh, and I realized I didn't make him co-host.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can now.
So I guess on the brand changes, ideally, I think maybe just asked to join the marketing committee meeting and just propose what you want to change. I don't know. Okay. Are you talking about like colors in the fonts? As long as the logo is consistent, I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, there's no design changes in the logo itself. Really, the only changes being proposed are slight changes to those 3 greens. Click on the Medium article in ticket number 42, and it provides a lot of rationale and why these changes are needed to kind of make improve the Node.js brand as a whole.
I mean, I'll look at it. Maybe what we can do is whatever we do, we can match the style sheet on the foundation website to the project website and just be consistent that way.
Yeah, I'd be happy to join and chat with the marketing folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I'll just have Greg work on it. I don't think we need a marketing committee. It's just let's try and be as consistent as possible. And I don't think anybody's tied to.
And so, sorry, Mark. I was gonna say I do think that we are kind of proposing a little bit of a tweak to the Node.js logo itself, and it's literally like the underlying hexadecimal colors that it is like the structure isn't going to change. It's just going to be slight like tweaks to make it consistent to an actual color system. And my understanding, like Adam has put a lot of work into this. It is also technically employed by a foundation member if you go up the chain of where he works. So like he's also collected a lot of research and work into this. I imagine if he presented this to the marketing committee, and full disclosure for everyone here, I've sat on the marketing committee for a while. I've helped out there. I've commented and brought community stuff there pretty frequently. If he brought this there, I don't imagine that there would be a lot of contention around them saying, let's keep it inconsistent, rather than have a well thought out design system behind this.
Let's just to go back though, we have a trademark that is granted to us by Joyent, and we've established this as a trademark. So when you change that stuff, it could potentially change our trademark, it becomes an additional trademark. I don't know if I have to check the details on that. So changing the colors of the logo is probably a significant thing. Changing the colors on the website is not so significant. And
and it's entirely possible that we can do one now and say we're going to use the color palette for the website and then work towards doing whatever's needed to bring the logo up to be consistent with it. Like I said before, the logo itself, the recommended Pantone colors for when you're going and making a print version of the logo don't change, because the changes in tint and hue are just really slight, so that when used in conjunction with the rest of the color system, it really just locks in. The three main brand colors themselves do ramp a little nicer internally with themselves, and it actually improves kind of the structural integrity, for lack of a better word, of the logo itself. But the color changes are so slight that unless you have a really close eye for design, you're probably not going to notice it unless it's explicitly pointed out to you. So it's probably something that we can work towards institutionalizing without blocking on it. But I think we should definitely start the conversation.
If you want to give me a copy of what you're proposing for the logo, I'm sorry, I'm not into the GitHub.
That's okay. It's not even on GitHub. I just posted a link to the article. Oh, Tierney, you did as well, in the chat here. That should have more than enough info on.
Okay.
Oh, did you submit this to the Node.js collection yet?
I did not. I was going to wait until we actually had a conversation about it before doing that, but I'd love to.
Yeah. I did not realize this was a different document until I scrolled down. So yes. Wow, that's I can't tell a difference. So yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is a really good write-up. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
And I'll read it then after this, and so I can digest, because I can't tell the difference, but that might be my. Oh yeah, I see one's lighter and one's darker.
And also the gradient is a little less blocky.
Yeah, if you look at it really shows in the hexagons gradient, right in the middle of the previous version, it gets really muddy, and that's because the hues between the two greens that it's grading between technically transition pretty drastically, and so as it starts going, as it starts transitioning, it starts to get muddy in the middle, whereas the updated version, it keeps a more smooth and solid look. The grays are also a little tinted to kind of get rid of the dusty look that the old straight flat grays had, and they're tinted a hair green, so they really lock in with the with the green of the brand.
Yeah, I just blew it up. It's. Let's not get too deep into it because maybe it's not that big a deal. I just want to make sure that if we update it, we do the correct things so that we don't invalidate our own trademarks.
Definitely, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I don't see a big problem in changing it if that, and none of us are lawyers, and
yeah,
that's good. If you just, I will reference this and see what we think.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you a lot, Mark, on that.
Sure. Thank you.
And so that kind of answers the second question. For the first question, like Mark was saying, I don't think we need to go through the foundation or,
Oh, Tierney, I think you cut out a little bit.
I think we lost him there.
Yeah. Oh well. That's cool. Well, we'll wait until he comes back in. Yeah. So continuing to dive into that first question until we get Tierney back. There's a number of these design systems tickets that are floating around in the org now, and I believe Drew, if you volunteered to take on the grid version, since you're working on something like that right now. But I'd love for all of these design systems features to really be fleshed out and stuck into a single packet, like we had discussed before, to hand off to any designers that need that. And I think, at least for things that don't affect brand or color, which I think color, extended color palette would be the only one, we can probably make that choice internally here on the website redesign committee. Does that sound like
correct? Like you suggested, we making a demo of something we are going to propose. Do we still have to work on that? Let's work on it first and see the outcome of it before we finally go into implementation or asking for help. So whoever's coming on the project to be of assistance or from the community aspect of things already knows what we want to work with and have an idea of what we actually want them to work on. So I actually think we should have a demo, probably at the end of the month or next 2 weeks, whenever, before we go on with asking for more help. I don't know.
A demo of what specifically, Gary?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you mentioned about the color changes and some certain things. Like we have a demo based on those color changes. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love. So regardless of what we make for these foundational things, I'd love maybe not this level of detail for the color changes, but at least a visual demo of what we're expecting from these design systems foundations. And I think that's the best possible way we can help keep consistency as we start enlisting community members for more detailed designs. So setting that standard of what level of detail we go into now will help us immensely down the line. Tierney, welcome back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think my hotel Wi-Fi dropped for the daily, you have to reconnect. It dropped exactly at that moment.
That's funny.
So, what I was trying to say about that first bullet point in there, let me get back to that, was that I don't necessarily know if we need to go down the path of bringing it to the foundation. It's more of an implementation thing on our side, and like Mark was saying, I don't know if we changes to the website can be the foundation website rather can be done, going down the line. That shouldn't be too big of an issue, hopefully. But getting this in, pushed through, I think we just need to get buy-in from the project more broadly. And I definitely do think it would be helpful to present it to and share this context with the marketing committee, just so they can have context on it, because I think they appreciate that we're doing some of this work. But I do think that we want to just get buy-in from the project, because that's generally where I've seen the most concern about things like this, is just that people want to have a voice, and they want to say, they want to make their own tweaks, and people have opinions. I don't think we're going to get a ton of negative input. It's mostly going to be positive from what I can, looking at this. You've done an incredible amount of work, and you have really solid reasoning for all of this. So I don't think there's going to be negative input. But I did actually add the CC agenda item just so we can talk about this, and then it'll probably even be elevated to the admin repo. And we might even, we're getting more and more things that we need to discuss in the, with the TSC and the ComCom together. So this might even be one of the, first agenda items for a cross-functional meeting there.
Yeah, do you think that'll extend to other design systems foundations we're going to need for the website? Stuff like grid, typography, scaling. I'm not expecting any. We should keep font. Let's keep that consistent, but just what's the size of body text? What's the size of a headline? Do you think that will require up-leveling too, or just?
I don't think that will. I think this is a little more sensitive than that kind of stuff. Yeah. And everyone who's working on this kind of, or working on, in the project, understands that those are design decisions that they should just be made, and they haven't been made with the current website, the Node.js.org website. So I don't think we'll need to go through that same level of process, but this is adding in a bunch of new things that honestly I think is a really good foundation for us. And so people would just want to kind of have their say and be able to kind of give their input on it as well. But awesome. Line height and stuff, no, we don't. And font choice.
Hopefully this will turn people's eye to website redesign. So for website specific things, if they want to be engaged with that, they'll know it's happening after we up-level this as well. So cool. I think that's kind of the direction the conversation was headed while you were offline as well. So does anybody feel differently, or do we kind of have consensus about how we think that'll go? Sweet.
Hey, Adam. Actually, I wanted to add something for the typography, iconography, grid system, color system, or any of the design process or sub process that we'll be introducing and implementing up in the new website coming up. So can we, or can committee can introduce or initiate some sub projects or little open source projects under Node.js Foundation about a forked version, either the forked version of the open source project, or open source, open source service that we'll be using for any iconography, we'll be using Font Awesome, for example. We can fork them up and make a suitable version for the icons, similarly for other design stuffs like grid, color schemas, and etc.
Certainly. So something. Sorry, go for it, Drew.
So that will be something that we can get some native feeling about design things and other stuffs. Actually, I haven't read all those proposals that you made in the last 2 days. I was having exam today. So I will go through them and also propose a little idea to the committee about introducing some little or tiny projects about initiating such open source projects under Node.js Foundation itself.
Yeah, so something I want to make sure we avoid is duplicating effort. I think it's important to give credit where credit is due, and especially if we kind of take something and tweak it to make it our own. It makes sense to manage that locally, like what happened with these color verticals that we used as a foundation for this color system proposal from Mineral UI. For things like Font Awesome, if we're saying use Font Awesome, let's just point to their website. I don't think there's much value in pulling it in under the Node.js project itself. But I do think there's a great opportunity here to spin out the design systems guidance into its own repo at some point once website redesign feels like it's in a mature state. But I think for now, let's definitely incubate it here in this project, and we can move it to a more dedicated central location after it's mature. And I think we'll just need to use our discretion for when and if we fork projects, or we fork documentation, or if we just point to the original websites and say use that. That's our standard. We'll need to make that call.
Like for the grid system I proposed today, I was actually working on a side project, something a more responsive, flexible, and robust grid system for CSS. So I think I should halt that project, or like get a duplicate copy of that project into Node.js Foundation, and so that Node.js Foundation can have its own separate grid system, similar to like what Bootstrap or Material UI already has, so that we can have a more control over the grid systems, for instance. And also for icons, like we can introduce more icons without any consent from the services that we are using. Like for Fontasm, we are very limited to though they are having a very large number of icons, but we are limited to the icons they do offer. But for Node.js, like we can have more icons being built by our designers or people involved in the iconography project, so that we can have a more control over the different stubs or projects that we'll be having.
Definitely. I think there's, oh, sorry, go for it, Tierney.
I was gonna say, I'd like to jump in on that. Having worked on this stuff with this stuff for quite a while, like the website stuff is how I got involved with Node.js and IOJS in the first place. We've definitely taken the approach of doing things ourselves the first time, or maintaining things ourselves. And what I found is that we have more success when we are additive to projects or others, because it enables those others to come and kind of contribute to us. And also, like, if we need extra icons, we can do additional icons on top of whatever system we choose. Like, that's less maintenance burden for us, because we actually have, a pretty extensive, this is just under the assumption that we go with Font Awesome, which I'm not actually asserting that we're going to do that. But, under the assumption that we went with Font Awesome, if there was an icon that we needed that wasn't in their standard library, we could, go ahead and build that into its own repository in our organization. But going through and duplicating a lot of the work, like Adam was saying, is a very heavy maintenance burden. And what I guess the main thing I've seen success with for us is reducing maintenance burden as much as humanly possible. And these other things are already doing so much to maintain themselves. It's kind of, similar to going out and rebuilding a Node.js. That we have a lot of people who do this, and just like they do. And I think it's good to be additive to them, and which also supports those projects and lifts them up. As we're all in Node.js right now. We're all working on this. I don't. It's hard for us to realize sometimes how important buy-in from the Node.js project is to people. It really does mean a lot. And having that support, for us, it's not really support. We're using a library that they're building, and we're very appreciative of that. But having that recognition for work that others are doing is actually really beneficial for the ecosystem as a whole. And so that's, in terms of the icons, that's why I think it would be good for us to do that and, be additive if we need to. But we can be additive when the time comes, because, as we're kind of experiencing with the design right now, there's not a ton of designers in the Node.js project. And so, Adam is probably the first and foremost in that space. And then, same with the grid system. There's so much work that has been done with, CSS grid systems, and even, I honestly think even going down that, we might want to specify what our needs are, but then the technical implementation will actually depend on what we do, how we actually technically implement our site. Are we going to go with a front-end framework? Are we going to do, handcrafted HTML and CSS and JavaScript? It will vary greatly depending on what we end up doing. And each of those, every approach that there is already quite a bit of prior art and quite a bit of work that's been done to make sure it's highly usable and accessible in ways that we wouldn't even consider at this point, and that it will reduce, again, our maintenance burden in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
I do support Terry on that because considering the fact that we might probably have to do a lot of stuff like heavy lifting ourselves. Like, imagine if we are going to like create an entire Twitter shop all over again by ourselves. That'll be a lot of work, and knowing full well that everybody here is a volunteer, and we have some other stuff that we might probably be working on at the same time while working on this. We still have to consider the fact that we should leverage other open source projects, like considering making use of Contosa, which things that we as developers should also encourage, and as an open source community should also encourage them by leveraging some of the resources that are already out there. But nevertheless, Joe's idea is not really bad. Maybe as the project goes on, where we start saying that we can't make use of this anymore, then we can encourage the use of creating our own resources. But I would still love if we are able to like having markdown on design concept, where people that will be contributing to where people that will be contributing to us, where that will be contributing on the projects can go through like a markdown or a documentation on design concepts in general. If anybody would love to contribute to this project, these are the resources we make use of. These are the things that should be your guidelines for contributing to the project. But nevertheless, we still have to make use of things that are already existing to reduce the load of maintenance, like current site. So, Jeff, I think the idea is nice, but for now, let's just stick with making use of resources that are already available.
100%. Yeah, it was a little difficult to hear you in there, Gary, but I think we got the gist. Yeah, I would totally agree with that sentiment. Okay, for the sake of time, I'd like to move on to the next bullet point. So the next point we have here is issue number 29. Identify topics to discuss for Collab Summit Spring 2018. This is for our in-person meeting coming up pretty soon, where we're, I think, hoping to, at least in my mind, I remember the discussion leading off with us wanting to knock out a lot of content. Is kind of the hope. Do people have the same impression from the last conversation we had? And what do you think we should be doing at the Collab Summit?
That's what my impression was as well. I forgot until you just said that, though. So I'm glad you said it. That said, I would also like to offer up something else that happened at Build. So, and this is, I don't want to get distracted off of this subject, but it kind of is tangentially related to something else I wanted to talk about. I don't know. I don't want to get too tangential, so actually I'll save this till the end, and others can hop in with other things they want to discuss or work on at Build. Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else have things that they'd like to see at the Collab Summit for when we meet up, other than working on, hammering out getting started content?
I actually had I think it makes sense as a bug first, but I guess if there's going to be an in-person summit, as a way to kind of finalize that or continue that discussion as well. Kind of like a parallel bug to the like getting started content, kind of like getting started experience. So like things we just consider to be important, like you mentioned, like the multi-file stuff or like localization, that sort of thing, like just kind of a series of metrics about kind of like what we want to make sure it provides, like accessibility and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I'd also like to add to that actually at Build I had a few discussions about docs And I do think that that's going to be something that we're going to have to solve. And like we're going to have to figure out how we're going to be able to interface with Node Core and the docs there, and also completely change the design, because we are going to want to have it be consistent in some way or another, and it's also going to have to be consistent without the rest of the website, because it's actually bundled into Node Core, so the docs are available for users there. And also making that accessible would be fantastic. I don't think it's accessible at all right now, so that would be another awesome step. But with that, I do think that we are going to have to hash out a lot of things around how we're going to be able to do this, and the Collaborator Summit is going to be a really good place for that, because there will be people who care about docs in core there as well, and who have been maintaining the docs in core for quite a while. I last night requested an agenda item or a session for docs explicitly to be added. So that might be a good time to do it on top of a website redesign session. But I do think it would be extremely useful for us to be involved in that discussion, in that group, because like I would really, really, really love to include RunKit in the way that they demoed with the buffer. That would be fantastic. I don't know if it's available offline. I imagine it's not. So we'd have to figure out kind of all these solutions around this and how we're going to approach that.
Yeah, I think with Francisco, and this might be getting too in the weeds for this higher level discussion, but it sounded like you just ripped out the code examples in the markdown files and stuck them into a RunKit embed. Is that correct?
It's actually just, it uses the markdown. So, kind of like Gatsby or whatever, like you just put them in there, and there's no like build step or anything, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the ideal is we change the TSC's process as little as possible. So sorry, I'm getting a spam phone call there. We change the TSC's process as little as possible and have them hopefully still work in Markdown, and we do whatever's needed on the build side for the website to hammer it into the shape we need.
And I guess another thing is, I can't remember who exactly, but if you just turn off JavaScript on those pages, you'll actually see like the degradation experience, and it's
nice.
It's essentially the same as what you would get today, which is examples that just don't run, but like the style itself and everything remains the same.
Yeah, I actually ran into that because for some reason the LinkedIn, I was on the LinkedIn network when that demo was going on, and for some reason LinkedIn was blocking the RunKit.js from loading. I need to talk to our IT department about that. But I could still see the examples clearly and read them just fine. So it was a good fallback experience. Going back to what are the priorities of getting started the getting started section, the docs, and the whole getting started experience. We had a suggestion. I can't find the ticket. I believe it was Milap who recommended it. And it's been brought up a couple times now, creating user personas for who our target audiences are, I think might help a lot as we draft content on location at the Collaborator Summit. And it might be good to come in with a proposal for that. So when we sit down at the table with all these other contributors who might not have been involved in these meetings, we can say, here's who we think we're writing for. Do you agree with that? And get that out of the way early so that we have a good target for as we start to draft content. I think that's certainly something we can work on now to prepare for the Collab Summit.
Adam, that does sound like a great idea, especially because, and thanks, Francisco, for bringing that up, the thing about accessibility. What Tierney suggested about the docs needing to be more accessible has come up repeatedly, both in terms of, well, I've more heard it in terms of it not being very readable and understandable to people who may not have as much familiarity as, say, whoever's written the current form of the docs would have or assumes people would have. But also there is something to be said. I'm not sure if you've considered actual accessibility on our website and
Mhm.
where it stands with like in relation to that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the stuff we've been talking about in particular that we think would be really cool and kind of really different than the things we've seen before is, which I think goes hand in hand with accessibility, is localization of the docs, including the example. So like it's just really unfortunate that, I mean, you know, step one is certainly like the surrounding text might be localized in your language, but then you get to the code itself and all the comments in the code are of course in English,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it'd be really nice to have like an actual Spanish experience or Portuguese experience or something like that. So
yeah, I'd like to call out the amazing work that the I18N team is doing right now. And they're working on that exact problem, actually. Once we actually start integrating with, once we actually start building the website, we're going to plan to integrate with all the work being done on the internationalization side, which I just know my GitHub username, open source. What's his name? Ben Mitchell, right?
Ben, yep.
Yeah. He's been leading that initiative and is really pushing to get a good international experience for both our in-code documentation, I believe the code comments, and pretty soon the getting started content and all the text content on the website once we integrate.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I believe there was a recommendation that we partner with Ben, or at least do a joint session for describing both what's going on with website content, internationalization, and possibly how we're planning on integrating. I'd like to explore that more at the in-person meeting.
It would very much help because, as I understand it, the stage they're at, starting to collaborate more closely with them would help both our work and make sure it's effective going forward.
Yeah. Cool. We have 10 minutes left. I know, Tierney, you wanted to bring up one more thing at the end.
Yes.
And so I'd like to switch gears and hopefully get a quick consensus on meeting time before diving into your last thing, Tierney. So as has been said multiple times, and as Tierney, you're now experiencing, 7 a.m. is really early. It's
really bad. I don't know how you do this. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Well, Node's been making me become a morning person. It's really weird for me too. But there's general want to push this back by at least an hour, this meeting time. I know people are in different time zones, and I wanted to make sure that before we just go and make the choice to do that we're not messing with anybody else's schedule, and that everybody who's currently active and engaging with this working group would still be able to make it if it was pushed back by an hour at the least.
So I will say 1 hour would block both myself and Mark Hinkle. There's a weekly Node.js certification meeting that happened. So, you know, the certification project that's completely outside of Node Core and all that stuff. That's about the foundation that happens starting in 9 minutes. So that would block myself and Mark from joining this, the foreseeable future.
Would 2 hours mean the two of you could make it? So if we start at 9 o'clock?
I should raise, just to point out, 2 hours would work. I think it would work well. But if we do ever have a thing where we decide to push our meeting to the next week, it would conflict with ComCom.
Yeah, I would basically just force us to skip a meeting if we don't, or find a different alternative time.
And we've also done that with ComCom a few times. We've like skipped a week. I think we're back to the original now, but that's happened like 3 or 4 times. So that's, you know, it's okay. That'll be done. And that's, you know, totally up to your discretion, and you know that can always be moved around.
Yeah, Drew, Gary, I think you two are in the most time zones from us. Would pushing back by 2 hours be okay for you?
Pushing back an hour is not going to be really nice for me. Then work it out, certainly. Hello, can you hear me?
What was that, Gary? One more time.
I said pushing back an hour is not really nice for me, but we can actually work it out, or I can reschedule some activities.
Okay, I think we're talking about pushing it back 2 hours.
Wow. No, it's not. 2 hours backward is like 1 p.m. ish, and not so nice for me at all.
Fun.
I mean, I'm okay. If you want to push it back an hour, I think I'm at a point where I'm about to be able to kind of. I shouldn't say that. I can evaluate it week by week, and see what I need to do in that. But if 1 hour works, don't let me be the blocker, please.
Okay, let's. Sounds like it's going to be hard to get consensus, at least here.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I would go for an hour since I'm the only blocker, and Mark does participate. But he's here more for us to ask context of. So not vital. I would suggest an hour.
Okay, let's call it for an hour right now, as long as you can make that work, Gary. And then we'll keep an eye on this moving forward and make sure it's working well for us in the near future.
Awesome, thank you.
Sweet. Oh, of course. Awesome. And that gives us 6 minutes for you, Tierney, to recap that discussion you had at MS Build.
Yeah. So one of the things I was discussing with James now is that he's been through the process of design by committee 3 times as well with IOJS and Node.js, and then IOJS again, or well, the website and then 2 logos. And it's always been a struggle. And one thing we were talking about is that actually there's corporate members who have designers. And so he actually said that they have Nearform itself has a few designers who are new to the team, and he vouched for their skill. New to the team and willing. They're opening up soon. And Nearform is very generous with their resources for Node.js. And he said that they would possibly be able to help out. So that kind of sparked the idea of, okay, well, if we're not going to be able to do this easily with design, open source community members, and that's still TBD. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. That is another fallback that we can go to, is reaching out to corporate members. As we were discussing earlier, there's a marketing committee meeting. I would be happy to take an action item for that, and do kind of a call out there, and then follow up with anyone who suggests that they have resources. Just because it's kind of a little bit incentivized, but then we also have a dedicated or a reason for them to kind of continue to participate, and it'll be able to be part of their work scope, hopefully. So that's just something I wanted to offer up. And I was the reason I was commenting in it about specifically about build, or about not build, the JS Coffee U, was that there might be a possibility of getting the Nearform designer out to do that. So I would have to talk to James about that. But I'm happy to kind of bring that up and see if that's going to be helpful or not a possibility.
I just wanted to chime in. It's funny you mentioned this because so I don't know if you guys know, but RunKit is owned by Stripe, and I had run by them a couple of weeks ago if we could make an arguable quote unquote donation to the Node.js Foundation through Stripe design resources, and they seemed relatively open to that. So I guess we'll throw our hat in, but if there's other people that really want to do it, that's fine. It's not something we are crazy pushing for or anything. Just we do have some extra Stripe design resources that we could point in that direction if that's kind of the way people would want to go. Just offering, I guess.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and I think if that is available, I think we like if that's definitely doable or possible. I don't think we should say no. Like I think it's more of a first come first serve. And James was like they will be available in the future. They're relatively soon, but not now. So if that's doable, if that's possible, if that's available, I definitely think there's not a reason to say no to that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Totally.
I can follow up offline, I guess. I mean, I think we'd actually be more available sooner rather than later, just given our timeline. I would be curious, just given the fact that we're using these other resources, if like we would have like a specific timeline for them, like, oh, we would want, from mid-May to the end of August or whatever we think it'll take. If that's something we think would be doable, like having that kind of a deadline, that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. I think I'd love to see the role of this working group be not just for content, but also to function kind of as a collective design manager. Because I think we're gonna see this a lot, where some corporate entity is able to donate 3 months of X number of designers' time, or we get one volunteer who's going to be really dedicated for a month. So we're going to get these rolling contributions of varying degrees, and I think the job of this organization from a design perspective should be to make sure that that's meeting the needs that the website has, and to make sure that it's targeted assignments and very well defined projects that still move the project forward in a cohesive way. So any time that can be donated by any group, like that's for us to appreciate and then manage appropriately. So Francisco, if that timeline you just gave of mid-May to August could be a concrete proposal, I'd say let's do it.
Yeah, I'm actually, so I'll be, we go to like Stripe offices like once a week. This is my Stripe day today. I guess it's good we talked about this. I'll go and try to get something like, this is what we can absolutely concrete offer. And then, just wait for if that works for you, or if you were like, oh man, we were hoping it would be a little bit longer, or we don't need that much time, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think by the end of today, I can probably have a pretty solid like proposal, like commitment wise.
Awesome.
Great. That sounds amazing.
I will say I probably don't think we're going to come back saying, oh, I hope we wish it was longer. Or, we were hoping for a bit longer. I don't think we're probably going to come back with that. But, the contribution is extremely valuable, and we really do appreciate you, stepping out for this.
Sure, yeah.
So
yeah, there are no shortage of design tasks, and we'll find a way to use any resources that are offered. That's for sure.
Cool. Happy to be help.
Just
awesome.
Sorry, Aaron.
I was just saying awesome.
Okay, so just rounding up, I got some mails from some guys, some mentees interested in contributing to the web redesign initiative. So I don't know, how do we fit in those guys, or should I just wait for the onboarding of the mentorship team? Should I just refer them back to the repo? Because I referred some to the repo and they were not able to open an issue or make any contribution. So I don't know how we can carry them along, probably giving them some tasks or having the design concepts MD prepared. Does that make sense? Probably get the design MD prepared so we can, okay, this is what we want and this is what we are actually working towards. So if you can contribute towards this, fine. If you can't contribute towards this, fine.
Yeah, so that's something that this group gets to figure out as a whole how to manage. I started to go down that path, but there's a projects tab on the repo, and there's a new project open called the Call for Designers Roadmap. And I'm hoping to keep all design related and design process related tickets here. Anything that we need help with is labeled help wanted. Now it's all very design systems focused stuff because we're working towards being able to have this open call for, hey, we need people to do high fidelity mocks of like actual pages on the proposed website. to then propose and bring to a discussion here and go through a couple iterations on. But we're laying that design groundwork, and we certainly need designers to help with that. So like coming up with, figuring out what our iconography spec is and getting that laid out, figuring out what our typography spec is, getting that worked out. We're gonna need probably stuff for elevations so that our, any drop shadows we make are consistent. And it's really just design choices that need to be made and documented. But that's certainly the design work we're doing at the moment. I think it's a little bit early to get people to do high fidelity mocks of actual pages on the website. Like I'd see that happening probably in a couple weeks. But if your design resources would be interested in working on that, we can point them towards that project in the repo, which will keep populated with design tickets.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
It looks like Tyranny dropped out because he had that other meeting to go to. But we are also at time and a little bit over. Are there any other huge pressing issues before we cut off the stream? No? Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining, and anybody called in on YouTube, thank you for listening in. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you for moving it an hour.
Yeah, of course. We're thankful too. Thank you for being flexible, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.